All right, welcome to session. What session is it? Five. Welcome to session 5 of the parenting class done at Pineview Homes in Everett, Michigan. The Adventures in Parenting is the curriculum we use. You're welcome to find that online. It is free to download. It's endorsed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the National Institute of Health. It's a good curriculum. So that's what we use as our base, and then we make it our style, I guess you could say. So we've been going through the curriculum, which is the RPM3. And so just to review what RPM3 stands for is responding, preventing, monitoring, mentoring, and modeling. We've talked about responding and preventing already, and today we are talking about monitoring for our parenting skill that we're going to talk about today. Pop quiz. There is no blank parent. Perfect parent, that's right. There's no perfect parent. These are tools in a toolbox, and they have to be adapted to your situation, right? There's no cookie cutter parenting. There's no cookie cutter kid. All of our kids, I have a boy and I have a girl, a couple years apart. I have the same basics, right? But I had to parent my boy differently than I parent my girl. So even within the same house, we're going to find that there is no cookie cutter. So these are not a how-to manual like you're working on a car. It's not like that. These are tools to put in your toolbox that you use and don't use at certain situations at certain times. Some you can use more broadly, some are more specific. So what we're talking about today is monitoring your child's contact with his or her surrounding world. In short, we should know what our kids are doing. We should just know what's going on with our kids. We don't need to have x-ray vision. We don't need to have eyes in the back of our head. We don't have to have those things. It helps sometimes, I think. And it seems like moms do have eyes in the back of their heads. I don't really understand it. It's that female intuition that dads don't have. There was times I remember my mom, how did she know? How did she know? Quick fun story. So when I was 9, I've always been fascinated with fire. Is your son fascinated with fire?
Yes.
Well, that means he's a good, healthy young boy then. So fascinated with fire, right? We had these little strip of woods in the back of our property. And growing up kind of halfway in the country, we're on the edge of a village in the country. So you go that way, it's all country. You go that way, it's kind of the little village town of the little town I grew up in. Well, there's a little strip of woods back there. And so somehow I found something that I thought would be cool to see it catch on fire. I think it was like a light fabric or something. I don't remember what it was, but I thought, man, that might burn pretty cool, right? And so me and a buddy, my next door neighbor, my best friend, like, look at this, and go get your mom's lighter. Okay, So we go out in this woods, and we kind of dig a little hole, and I mean, we're a 9-year-old, we're smart enough to know to get the dry leaves away, right? So we dig a little hole, and we put this little fabric in there, and we're lighting it. There was no smoke, there was no smell. We didn't even have it lit yet. And then my mom comes walking through the woods. She never comes, that's our territory. She never comes out in the woods. And I'm like, what the, and I, as a 9-year-old firstborn sensitive boy, I just start crying immediately because I know I'm in trouble. I know I'm not supposed to be doing that. And she comes out there. What you doing, Rod? Oh, and then my best friend, he just walks away. He disappears. He was good at disappearing. Whenever we got in trouble, even in our teenage years, he would just, where'd Brian go? He's good at disappearing. He was a bigger kid than I was too. I don't know how he did it. He could just make himself invisible. And what you doing, Rod? Oh, I got the lighter in my hand and I got this fabric and whatever. And she's like, oh, you gonna start a little fire there? Oh, and then I probably tried to blame it on my best friend, but she knew better. And she goes, you know what you're gonna do tonight? I'm like, what? She goes, you're gonna wet the bed. I'm like, get out of here. I'm 9 years old. You're gonna wet the bed. You're playing the fire, you're gonna wet the bed. No, I'm not going to wet no bed, So I give her the lighter and I give her the fabric. I didn't even caught it on fire. I don't even know what it would have done. I never found out. And to embarrass myself, by golly, I wet the bed that night. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because she put that thought in my head, or it was really a thing with playing with fire. I don't know what it was, but I wet the bed. And when I did, of course, I'm crying again, and she goes, I told you. But anyway, the story is, I don't know how my mom knew to come out to the woods. I still to this day have no clue. And we've talked about it a couple times now that I'm an adult. And she's like, I just knew you were up to something. I must have done something maybe in the house that made her like, what's the boy doing or something. But I swear she did have eyes in the back of her head. I swear she did have x-ray vision. And that was a good little example of her monitoring. It must have been my behavior, something. Because it wasn't like she ever would come out to the woods. She just let us play. We were little feral country children with bare feet and dirty nails, but that day, and I think it was probably the first and only time she ever came out to the woods, I think. But yeah, she did. She had that intuition. She was monitoring my behavior, and she may have saved the forest. I don't know. It's possible. So what monitoring does is it combines asking questions and paying attention to your kid with making decisions, setting limits, and encouraging our child's positive choices. And here's the key: when we're not there. Because there's going to be times when we're not with our kids. One of the parenting styles, if you remember that way back in the first session, we did the 4 main parenting styles. And there's one that parents, they have this type of parent has this really, it's fear-invoked control, and that's the helicopter parent. They're always, they're hovering around their kids. I just learned, I was talking to somebody, a friend, about summer camp. In the 90s, summer camp was a big thing where parents would send their kids off to summer camp. It could be a basketball camp or maybe a church camp or a swimming camp or something like that. And they'd send them off to camp for a week. And you wouldn't see your kid for a week during the summer. I'm sure it's more for the parents than the kids probably. But it kind of went away for a while. But it's kind of coming back, these camps, these summer camps and stuff. And I was talking to a friend about these camps, and they said, I have this family that they'll send their kid to camp, but they go with them. I mean, what do you mean they go with them? Yeah, they will rent like an Airbnb, or if they can be on campus at the camp, they will. But the whole family, the mom, the dad, the younger siblings, they'll be with the kid at the camp. And it's this helicopter parenting thing. It's this, I can't trust, and maybe there's a good reason to. I don't know the family, but maybe there's a good reason that they can't trust their kid at camp. But it didn't seem like that's what it was. He didn't seem like a troublemaker. It was just, they just couldn't leave him. And that's kind of an example of a helicopter parent. So, but monitoring is not being a helicopter. Monitoring is realizing there's going to be times where you're not right there with your kid. And when you're not with your kid, but you still should know what they're doing, who they're with, what's going on, when are they going to be home. And as they get older, those freedoms will get bigger and bigger. When they're little, monitoring is easy. When they're kids crawling around on the floor, if you want to monitor them and you want them to go from this side of the room to that side of the room, you pick them up and move them, or it's time to eat, pick them up and you put them in their high chair. Can't do that to a 10-year-old. Can't do that to a 15-year-old. Try. It doesn't work. Monitoring, it does change as our kids get older, but the truth of the matter is, whether young or old, being a careful monitor combines those things. I think it might be a blank on your sheet there. Yeah, so that A and B. So what that does, being a careful monitor combines asking questions to your kid, paying attention. Dads are more guilty of not paying attention, I think, than moms. Asking questions, paying attention, and it combines making decisions based on what you're seeing and then setting limits. That's basically what you're doing. Many things can change as our kids get older, and a kid, as they learn about their personalities and their independence, and they have friends and that sort of thing, you could clash. When they're little, they want to be with mom, they want to be with dad. Hey, let's go to the park. Yay, we're gonna go to the park. 15-year-old, hey, you want to go to the park? No. You know? So today, my kids are older, they're 19 and 17. I'll tell you what, if I get a text from my 19-year-old, I'm like, oh, interaction. To when he was 4 or 5 or 6, I mean, you almost take it for granted until it's not there. When they're younger, it's like they're glued to you, you're Superman or you're Superwoman. But when they become teenagers, 12, 13, chinks in the armor start to show up, and they get friends and that sort of thing. And their personalities and those efforts of monitoring your kid, it can clash, and they can be annoyed. And unfortunately, a lot of times with teenagers, they don't want that monitoring because they're probably doing some things that could be risky behavior. And we talked about last week, preventing that risky behavior, preventing those problems. The more a teenager, is opposed to your monitoring, the more likely there's something they don't want you to know. Now, it may not be like a crazy bad behavior, but it just may be something that I just don't want mom or dad to know this thing, whatever it is. And sometimes it's okay to give them some space. Okay, I don't need to know that right now. But if you see signs of those risky behaviors, it's our job as parents to protect our kids even from themselves sometimes. So if you need to be the annoying parent that constantly wants to know where they are, tell you what, I found this with my kids. I was kind of like that. I wasn't a helicopter parent, but I want to know who they were talking to online. And there was times where I would tell my son, if he had like the headphones on, even online gaming and stuff, I'd tell him, turn the volume up for a minute. I wanted to hear what the conversation was. And he would. And of course he would, I'm sure, act somewhat different when dad was in the room, right? But then if I would hear things they were talking about that weren't good, or maybe it's a lot of swearing or cussing or whatever, and he's got his little sister around the room. Plus, I don't want that going into his head all the time. I would tell him, boy, are these people you usually play with? And if it was like, no, I don't usually play with these guys. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get off of this game? Because these guys seem to be kind of, maybe they could tell they're older or something. Maybe not the best influence, whatever. So he would oblige. He'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm not that big of a thing. And then he'd find the other friends. But the main friends that he did play with online, I knew them by name. And I even, from a distance, kind of talked to them or heard their voice, so they heard my voice, that sort of thing. So I tried to really monitor my kids' online activity. But there's so many loopholes in that. It's not like going down to the park and seeing the 7 kids. That's the whole world at their fingertips. And that can be scary and whatnot. But if you're showing yourself as present, like in their life, a lot of times they themselves will be like, okay, well, I know dad or mom would not approve of this, so they might not be super proactive at it, but at least they have an inclination to maybe avoid that thing, especially if you're present. And I don't mean physically right there watching the game, but you're a active influence, I could say, in their life. They know that mom or dad will find out eventually, if that makes sense. It's when we isolate from the kids, it's when we isolate ourselves, or, oh, I don't care, go do whatever you want, that it's a slippery slope at that point. And we need to kind of be those checks, basically, for their interaction with their surrounding world. That's our job. They're not old enough, mature enough yet to be able to understand what those boundaries ought to be, and let alone enforce them. Because a lot of kids, they don't have parents, guardians that will have those types of boundaries. And if, hey, my best friend, mom doesn't care or dad doesn't care, why should I? And if they can't say, well, because my dad says or my mom says, they may interpret what's good and bad based on a poor source, if that makes sense. So we need to be those checks. We're those checks and balances for what's right and what's wrong. It's just, that's our duty as parents, right? Okay, so we do need to, even as our kids grow up, we do need to still monitor our children's comings and goings through every age and stage of growth. Oh, and that's number 2. That's your blanks there. Parents need is the word to monitor their children through every age or stage, every stage of growth. Okay? Being an active monitor, it can simply mean answering some basic questions. And yeah, it may be annoying to our 16-year-old boy. I get that. But it's still our job. So these basic questions could be look like this. And these are in your book. Who is your child with? And I would just add, who are they really with? Right? So if, hey, I'm going to go play with Billy. Okay, I know Billy. Okay, Billy may be there. Who else is there? Or how long is Billy going to be there? Say it's a 3-hour event. Yeah, Billy might be there for an hour. Well, what about the other 2 hours? Who is actually going to be with your child? Whether we like it or not, every single person that interacts with our kid influences them. We can't get away from that. Teachers, coaches, the person at McDonald's, the person in the grocery store. It does cousins. It doesn't matter. If they interact with your kid, you can mark it down. It's an influence. It's some type of influence. Now, it may be minimal, but it's still there. So we should be careful who is with our kids. What do you know about the person? Is it just, oh, he's friendly, I see him every once in a while, I like the kid's personality, okay? Well, I mean, do you know who this kid's parents are? Do they just let him run feral? Like I was when I was a kid, somewhat. If I could get away from my mom's eyes behind, in the back of her head. What do you know about the kid? What do you know about the friends? What do you know about the girlfriend? What do you know about the parents? What do you know about the people that your kids are being touched by, so to speak, influenced by? Where is your child? I've referenced it before. I just think it's funny. Back in the 80s, maybe the 90s too, a commercial would come on. I think it was 8 o'clock at night. It's 8 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Did you really? Yeah. They don't still air it on TV, do they? I doubt it.
No, but there was a comedian that brought that up on
Facebook. Gotcha. Yeah, I remember actually seeing
those women that they had children in the 80s.
Right. Oh yeah, I have kids. That's right. Yeah. There's a funny little clip on The Simpsons where that comes out of The Simpsons, and Homer's sitting there like he always does, and that commercial comes out. Do you know where your children are? And he goes, I already told you no. Right? It's hilarious. So, but as parents, we are responsible to know where our kids are. Oftentimes when I've heard parents say, oh, my kid got in trouble, and I was surprised by it, many times they would say something like, I didn't even know he was going down there, wherever that down there is. I didn't know he was under the bridge. I didn't know he was downtown. I didn't know he was over by this guy's house or whatever. That's the funny thing about people. We are mobile. We move. I don't care if you're walking, bicycle, whatever. I would have to ask permission to go downtown on my bike. It was about 15-minute bicycle ride, and we always had to ask permission. And how my best friend got permission was we would ask my mom or dad first, hey, can we ride our bikes downtown and go to the grocery store? We had $2 typically. We got a X-Men comic book for $1.25, and we got a 20-ounce Coke because there were 65 cents plus a dime deposit in Michigan. Exactly $2 is what it came out to be with tax or something. It came out to exactly $2. So I would ask my mom permission, and typically she would let me go if I could. My best friend's parents, they weren't stricter. They actually were more detached than my parents, but they were annoyed more easily with their kids, maybe. And so when the kid would ask for something, oftentimes it was, now, get out of my face, kind of thing. So while my best friend would do it, he would say, can I go downtown on my bike? Rodney can. This is how he would do it. And so that was telling parents, I'm going to be with Rodney. And sometimes it would work. And sometimes they would say, Rodney's going, why would I blanky blank care if Rodney's going, And I'm like, I'm hearing it. I'm like, oh, there's this little 8-year-old boy. But anyway, but my mom would say, just go to the store and come back. And that she knew how much time that should take. 45 minutes, 15 minutes there, 15 minutes in the store, 15 minutes back. And if I wasn't back around that time, she'd start to get a little agitated. And I do remember a couple times where as I'm riding vigorously down the road, because I knew I was late, I'm just booking as hard as I can home. I saw her in her car pulling out. There's no cell phones, right? Pulling out, and she was gonna come look for me. It was a small town. It would have been hard to find me. But as she's pulling out, I'm just pedaling as fast, as hard as I can. I'm here, Mom. I was gonna come look for you, you know. And so she wanted to know where I was gonna be and how long it was gonna take, etc. So we need to know where our children actually are. What are they doing? Oftentimes when we ask our kids, hey, what'd you do? What did you do when you did this? What did you do on this day? What did you do last night? What did you do over the weekend? Whatever. Oftentimes the answer we get is what? Nothing, right? Well, obviously they were doing something. I'll do that with the boys here. If they have a home visit, I'll ask them, hey, how did your weekend go? Good. Well, what'd you do? Nothing. Okay, so I know there's something. And so what I'll do is I'll say, well, I got you. Well, tell me what you did Friday after you left here. What'd you do? Did you guys go to the store? What'd you do? And they'd think, you know, oh, we ate. Where'd you eat? Oh, we went out to eat, to whatever. Okay, well, that's something, right? But originally it was nothing, right? And then what about Saturday morning? Did you sleep in? Yeah, I slept in, you know, whatever. Then what'd you do? Oh, I played video games, ate cereal. You know, so I get a story. I'm actually getting a timeline. And you'd be amazed at just tracking what they're actually doing. It also can kind of show you maybe some either positive, some interest they may have. Like say I went fishing down by whatever river or whatever. Well, how long were you there? Well, I don't know, you know. Well, but I left about noonish, when after lunch or whatever, and it was like almost dark when I came home. Okay, I mean that's a long period of time, and so now I might dissect that a little more. You know, were they really fishing the whole time? And that's a long time. Where did you fish at? Did you stay in the same place? Did you go across the river? Did you get in the river? You know, I try to get an actual story out of them. Not that I'm trying to get them in trouble. That's not what it is. I just want to actually know what were they actually doing during those times. So that's important to know what our kids are actually doing. It also can show some negatives. Well, the positive would be he loves fishing. Use that. Hey, let's go fishing or whatever it is. It also show some negatives. Well, I got on video games. Okay, I got on video games after breakfast, and then I stopped to eat lunch, and then I stopped to eat dinner. Okay, so you're telling me you were on video games for 10 hours straight? Okay, we need to do some adjustment there, right? Some balancing out or whatever. My kids hate that word balance. So what are they actually doing? And the way you can do that is you can kind of cut up the day. What did you do in the morning? You know, you're not in trouble, but just I always want to know. What did you do after lunch? And where did you go? What did you do? That sort of thing. Timing, I already kind of mentioned this, but when will your child be home? When will they be leaving? That was what my mom did. All right, are you leaving right now? Yes, I'm leaving right now for the store. I just go to the store and back. Are you just going to the store and back? Well, I might stop by Tyler's house. That was another friend we had in town. Okay, well, don't stay too long, whatever. She wanted to know an approximate time of when I was going to be home. And then, how are we moving around? This is kind of a big deal. A lot of times boys and girls can get in trouble with not so much where they're going, when they're going, who they're hanging out with, but how are they getting there? Is Big Brother going to pick them up? Well, who's Big Brother? All of a sudden, you put your kid in a car with some guy that you might not know. You don't know what he's doing. You don't know where he's in control at that moment. Who's ever driving, if it's a car, who's ever driving, you're kind of really trusting that person, even for that 10-minute drive, whatever it is, with your kids. I don't mean to oversell it, but with your kid's life. I mean, literally, is he intoxicated? Is he going to swing by and pick up his girlfriend? Who is she? You know, I mean, there's this questions about how they're getting there. If they're just riding their bike or walking, fine, you know, but really knowing how your kid is getting wherever and how they're getting home is important too. Okay. How much time we got? Okay, we're doing good. Some of the things just to keep in mind when it comes to being an active monitor, you want to keep the lines of communication open with your kid. That's why all this stuff that we've been talking about, it involves a lot of talking. Questions. What's going on? Oh, that sounds cool. And the more positive you can make that conversation, the more open they'll be to share. You don't want to be like, oh, what'd you do? Oh, you got in trouble last time, so rah, rah, rah. Okay, that's going to shut them down. But hey, I want to know what'd you do? Oh, that sounds like fun. Cool. Maybe we should do that sometime, or whatever. Keep it light and positive. That'll keep those lines of communication open with your kid. And the more positive you can keep it, the more they want to talk, because people love to talk about, I don't mean to make it sound like we're all selfish creatures, but we love to talk about ourselves. We just do. And so if your kid has an interest, enter their world, whatever that, even video games, enter their world. What did you do? What game were you playing? Are you good at that game? What's the highest level you've been on? Are you better than your friends? Just get them talking. Whatever their interest is, doesn't mean that you have to play video games yourself, but it's okay to ask about it because it's their interest, if it's fishing or whatever it is. Now this one I want to camp on just a little bit. Another thing to keep in mind when being an active monitor is telling your child what thoughts and ideals you value, and then what's even more importantly, and why. And why do you have those values or those ideals for yourself? That may be a blank there. Yeah, so number 3, tell your child what your values are and why you hold them. And then the end of the story is, oftentimes, if you tell them why, and it's an open line of communication and they can ask questions about it, they will often adopt similar values. May not be exact, but the hope would be, if it's a value, something that you are, it's important to you. If you share, this is why it's important for mom, and here's why, they oftentimes will adapt those similar values. And that really does help with a lot of this monitoring, because it builds trust between you and the kid. It builds camaraderie. It builds, when they get into a jam, who are they going to call? Oh gosh, mom's smart. She's told me what she believes, and she knows why she believes it. It's not just because that's how I was raised. That's not an invalid answer, but why does she really actually hold those values, whatever that may be? A value may be, we in our house, everyone's home by 9 o'clock, whatever, on the weekends or whatever. And maybe it's a dinner time type thing. That was a value that we held when I was growing up in the 80s. We were kind of like like the nuclear family, I guess. Mom and dad were both still in the house. They weren't divorced. I had 2 little sisters and myself, and dad came home about 5:30 every single night, and 6 o'clock was dinner time. So it didn't matter where I was. I could be running feral downtown. I could be out in the woods trying to start fires, whatever. 6 o'clock, I was expected to be home and be around that dinner table. That was a value that we held. And there was a couple times as I got older, Brian and Robbie are going somewhere at 5:45. I want to go do that. Why do I have to do that, Mom and Dad? And so I remember asking and kind of pushing a little bit on that. And they said, well, because we value family time. And it's 20, 30 minutes out of your day, and during the weekdays, so sometimes on the weekends too. At once a day, we all come together because we are the family. Now, it's okay to have friends, and they would kind of explain this. It's okay to have friends. It's okay to have best friends, eventually girlfriends, and that sort of thing. But this is your core family. So at 6 o'clock every day, you're expected to be here. There's a value, and they kind of explain why. And so then after a little while, I didn't even question it. It's just part of life. And if they wouldn't have explained why, how it was important to just come together as a family, I may have pushed even harder. Like if they would have said, just because you're a kid and you need to do what we say. All right, well, I'm going to push on that pretty hard, as a rebellious teenager or whatever. But that was for example, that was one of the things they explained. This is an important value in our family. We come together. And so, and honestly, I did adopt a very similar behavior with my family. We had dinner times, and it wasn't strictly at 6 o'clock every night, but we did have times of coming together around the table. It was important to talk about our days and see what was going on, and we just adopted that when the kids were, in the house and that sort of thing. So I guess I'm an example of this very thing happening. My parents instilled a value in me. I adopted it myself, and then I even put it into my family. And hopefully my kids will do something similar when they get older and have their own families. All right, very good. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to being an active monitor is to know what your child is watching, reading, playing, and listening to. That TV, that video game stuff, we've already kind of talked about that somewhat. But just remember that whatever comes into our kids' ears and eyes the word is influence. They are being influenced to one degree or another. I'm not saying if they play, a first person shooter like video game where like shooting like what's that one, Halo, or like I don't know video games very well, Call of Duty, whatever. Those sort of, I'm not saying that if they play those games they're gonna grow up to be a shooter, like a criminal. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there still is a psychological influence on them no matter what they do, no matter what they see. So it's important to just know what our kids are doing online, what they're playing, that sort of thing. The rule, or I guess the value that I had with my son, and my parents didn't have to deal with this because we weren't cool enough to have video games. I'd go over to my friend's house to play video games because we didn't have the money for the consoles or whatever. But it's a different world for my kids. My son knew, and my daughter too, but she didn't really play much. My son knew that if it was a rated M game, that's like the rated R. If it was a rated M game, he had to ask me permission. Now, when he was little, it was just, no, boy, when he was like 9, 10, whatever. But as he got older, like, 15, 16 years old, whatever, even at that age, he knew he had to ask. Even if it was free to download, he had to ask, hey, can I download this rated M game, whatever. And there's a couple that I let him, but what I would do is I'd say, okay, I need to know the name of it. And then I would Google search on my phone parental reviews, and I would find, why is it rated M? And if it was like Alien Green Blood or whatever, I'd be like, yeah, you can go ahead and download that one, whatever. But there's this and my phrase was, we're just not going to do that one right now. That was my phrase. And so I kind of gave him a little glimmer of hope of maybe someday kind of thing. It wasn't just a hard, no, it's terrible and whatever. But I'd say, we're not going to do that one right now. And he's most of the time like, okay, A couple times he was like, but I really want it. Well, then I'd say, well, let me think about it a little bit. I mean, I knew the answer was still going to be no, but let me think about it a little bit. I'll read a couple more reviews, and then when I come to the conclusion, I will tell you why. So then what I would do is I'd say, all right, boy, come here. And I would actually show him on the review, like on my phone, I'd show him, it says it does this, maybe it was like sexual content or something like that. It says this, and it says this, and here's the swearing, and here's the blood, and whatever. And it's just too much negative. And so that's why. And I actually show him, and typically that would work. He'd be like, all right, and there's hundreds of games that they can play. And I know there's some that are more popular than others, but in my house, that's how we did it. And it seemed to work pretty well. He's 19 now. I don't know what he's playing, but I still think some of those values still are instilled in him. I do remember hearing, well, my daughter too. I remember hearing, my daughter, one time she was, I think, playing VR, and you can hear the other people pretty clearly. And one of them was popping off swearing or whatever. And she actually told him, I don't think she realized I was within earshot. She goes, hey, if you don't quit swearing, I'm going to leave. Or something like that. And so it's neat to see some of those values coming out in my kids and whatever. And so there is hope for our children after all. Okay, I think we're good on that. I'm going to skip that a little bit. Yeah, and so the last thing on your worksheet is this. Good monitoring is the best deterrent, is the word deterrent for negative behavior. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it here at Pineview. So good monitoring is the best deterrent, because if they know that mom or dad are watching. It doesn't mean you're helicoptering. It just means that mom and dad are plugged in and involved in my life. It matters what I do now, if that makes sense. Because if I go somewhere and I'm late, or if I know mom or dad are gonna know. They're plugged in. It's the kids where they can sneak back in. They can just appear. Kind of like my best friend. He could be invisible then visible. And parents don't even. Where were you? Oh, I was downtown. Oh, okay. All right. Not good enough. We need to know. And so the more monitoring we do, the more our kids will know it matters what I do when mom and dad's not around, because it matters, because they care, and they are watching, so to speak, is a good way to say it. All right. I just want to read this. This is in your book, but I thought it was good, so I just want to read this real quick. It's a little special note on those with preteens or teenagers. So I'm just going to read it, and then we'll be done. It says, keep in mind that even if you're the most careful monitor, your child may have friends and interests that you don't understand and don't approve of. You may not like the music she listens to, or the clothes he wears, or the group she hangs out with. Some of these feelings are a regular part of the relationship between children and adults. And this is kind of the key. Before you take away the music or forbid your child to see that friend, ask yourself this question. Is this, whatever it is, person, music, TV show, clothes, whatever, is it actually, I would say actually, a destructive influence? I think that's fair, because we as the adults need to have subjective and objective reasons why we do what we do. And if we just don't like, I don't know, big one's rap music. It's rap music. Okay, so there's all types of rap music, and a lot of it is pretty nasty. I mean, I get that. But for example, I'm actually friends with a clean rap artist down in North Carolina. I mean, it sounds just like everything else. Well, he wouldn't like me saying that because he's more unique than that. He wouldn't like that. He does. It's great. It's great, Rob. And it's different than anything. Anyway, but it's very good influence. It's positive, but the sound of it sounds like your classic rap, basically. And so a parent, possibly, or an adult, they could have a presupposed rejection, say, of rap music. And so they hear my friend and they, oh, it's garbage. Well, it's actually not. It's actually very good words and lyrics and influence. But so we have to be a little careful with that. The video games, for example, like, hey, Dad, can I download this video game or whatever? Okay, and it wasn't just if it was rated M or not. It was, okay, what's the purpose of the game? Is it actually destructive or not? And as they get older, I think it's okay to have more and more freedoms in that, with limits, obviously. But I think it's a good check on us as parents, as the adults, to say, hey, is this person, and maybe the friend kind of grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, for example, and maybe we have a predisposition that says we're going to avoid all people like that look a certain way or act a certain way or whatever. And I'm not saying that there can't be some assumptions made, but we just have to be careful. So is the person, the music, TV show, whatever it is it actually destructive? In other words, is your child hurting anyone or being hurt by what he or she is doing, listening to, or wearing, or who he or she is spending time with? If the answer is no, you may want to think before you act, perhaps giving your child some leeway. It's likely that taking music away, not letting your child watch a certain show, or barring your child from spending time with a friend will create conflict. Will create conflict between you and your child. Make sure that the issue is important enough to insist upon. So I think that's good. I think, we have these set boundaries, these values, whatever it is. Is the battle worth the fight? And sometimes it is. I mean, definitely sometimes it is. My mom coming out and saying, what are you doing, Rod? When she knew I was up to no good. She literally could have saved the forest or the houses. I mean, it's very possible. So is it possible sometimes that we have to say, no, you're not going to hang out with that person because of real evidence, not just our assumptions, right? Or no, you cannot go do this thing, or no, you're not going to play that video game. I mean, whatever it is. There's sometimes we need to say no. There's sometimes where we need to say, yes, but not right now. That's fair sometimes. Or maybe, let me think about it. That's fair as well. And if our kid demands an answer right away, I've had that too with my kids. Well, just tell me yes or no. Well, then it's no. I mean, it's easy. If you're going to demand an answer right now, because I haven't had time to process it or think about it, the answer is no then, for safety reasons, because I don't know yet. Now, I'm not saying take a week to decide, right? But give me some time. So think about whether your actions will help or hurt your relationship with your child, or whether your actions are necessary for your child to develop healthy attitudes and behaviors. You may decide that setting a volume limit for the radio is better than having a fight about your child's choice of music. Rap music, you know? I mean, make sure they're not, some of the words are just really bad. I get that. So maybe there's just certain artists or songs that you say no, for example. But maybe they want to still listen to rap music. Fine. But maybe it can't go past level 7 or something. Some sort of boundary there. It's kind of almost like a compromise. So this is something I just wanted to mention. So, all right, very good. Well, that was monitoring. Next week is, what is next week? Next week is mentoring. Mentoring and then modeling. Actually, next week, we probably won't record because next week is the mid-course test. So yeah, so that'll be fun for me. This is, if you remember, this is a certificate program. So there's at least one, if not 2 tests. So I would encourage you to go through all your notes from the beginning to today, because that's what the test will revolve around. So, okay. All right, very good. Well, thank you for joining us.